Vig is the Deputy Commissioner of the Project Development Division at CDOT. He leads CDOT's teams who manage transportation planning and programming, complete streets and traffic design, public space and streetscapes, right-of-way policy and development review, and citywide micromobility and sustainability initiatives, including Divvy bike share and tree planting. The Project Development Division has been at the forefront of CDOT's efforts to the confluent challenges of COVID-19, economic hardship and equity, responding with rapid delivery projects and new pilots from shared streets to bus lanes. Vig has a background in transportation planning and engineering and brings backgrounds to strategic planning, mobility, consulting, and private sector mobility planning to CDOT. And with that, I give you Vig.
Thank you, Josh. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. First of all, thanks for this opportunity to address the audience, and congratulations to all the members and individuals honored tonight for your contributions to academics, community service, and the betterment of the practice and contributions to ITE. Also, thanks to everyone who has made this their career and contributions you make every day as part of your daily life in this industry, which is so vital to the topics that I'd like to speak about tonight, which are our streets. Next slide. And so sitting here tonight, it's really hard on Zoom not to make this talk about the pandemic. And certainly it's probably become cliche to say that this year or these times are unprecedented. And certainly they are. But as we now all sort of hang on to the hope of vaccination and life returning back to normal, it begs us to then think about how do we make sense of the year past and the times that we still experience. And front and center in everything that's happened and is happening are our streets. And our streets are an expression of so much more than just our transportation planning and engineering. But very many of the vulnerabilities and values in society are expressed through our streets. And I think that we could look at this last year and these times as the times of the things that didn't happen and the sacrifices that we have made and we continue to make, the parties and celebrations that didn't happen in person or the gatherings that we've missed. And certainly if we look at the data, that may be one story to tell. Next slide. And so here's a picture from early on, right at the height of lockdown in spring of 2020, which is a little coyote running down Michigan Avenue. And that's certainly an image that I think a lot of us will remember and is borne out by some of the data. Next slide. So in March, when Governor Pritzker announced the statewide shutdown, we saw just a dramatic decrease in motor vehicle traffic, just down almost half in that first week. And that was a trend that slowly, went up over time, through the summer, kind of almost reached maybe 95% of this is sort of baseline to 2019 numbers that we saw in the past year in a comparable month or a comparable week. And so that kind of bears out the story of, of sacrifice and things that we didn't do. But it's not the whole picture. Next slide. But this year was sort of the year of the bicycle. And our Divvy ridership in Chicago has just sort of surpassed anything that we've seen in prior times, and it's just eclipsed in the months of July, August, and even through our fall, things that we've seen in prior years. And so this has been written about, in the popular media and probably talked about amongst many of you in terms of what's going on. And so I sort of put out there that the question always comes up of, purpose and need, right? In our discipline, we talk about purpose and need. And I think this demonstrates that those decisions that people make and what people think are essential is really, really very sensitive to very small changes. And so there were a lot of investments made by CDOT and our programs in DIVI and expanding that help explain some of this, but at the same time, what we're kind of seeing is a fundamental pattern break or a period of nonlinearity where small changes are actually creating dramatically different outcomes in how people behave and react. Next slide. And unfortunately, that's true on some of the more somber outcomes when it comes to our streets. And in 2020, we really did see with those changes in traffic volume, some troubling and concerning issues on our streets regarding to speed and traffic fatalities. And so roughly our traffic volumes, even though they've recovered now to sort of 80 to 90% of pre-COVID volumes, we've seen about, on average, 10% faster speeds, but traffic fatality numbers that are just disproportionately higher based on that small change in speed. And so this has resulted in, a loss of progress in some ways of some of the things that we've all worked hard as engineers in terms of designing complete streets and pursuing safety, because the context that people are facing is fundamentally different. Next slide. And how could we talk about the year without the outcry of anguish and heartache related to the George Floyd tragedy and other similar tragedies across the country, and people taking to our streets as an expression of the fundamental principles of our democracy, of having discourse and having debate. And particularly when, other forms of private congregation were really constrained, that importance of that public space that our streets serve was underscored even more. And yet, I think we have to challenge ourselves as practitioners in this field to understand the intersectionality, that these events aren't things just taking place in our street, but many of the themes related to inequities and racial justice really affect the work that we do. Next slide. And so I present, these data that, through our Vision Zero work at the City of Chicago, we've identified that much as COVID has afflicted communities of color disproportionately in terms of health outcomes, traffic violence has followed many of these unfortunate same disparate patterns. And so our streets really, in looking at these trends over this year, have become kind of a mirror to a lot of things going on in society. Next slide. So what do you do as a Department of Transportation? I'd love to just touch on some of our activities over the past 12 months, let's say, and then exciting work coming in 2021 in the context of all of this. So communication and engagement are really kind of at the foundation of how we have helped wrap our heads around this time period. And congratulations again to Deputy Jamie Simone, who is honored tonight for a lot of this work actually in jumpstarting the CDOT newsletter and getting a citywide mobility survey, asking people, what do we need to do to respond and be accountable to what's going on in the city and deliver quickly. And so at CDOT, it wasn't really the year of what didn't happen. It was actually the year of all the new things that did. Next slide. So one of the programs, as mentioned earlier, were our shared streets, responding to the need for being out and exercising and getting fresh air and doing that in a way in our communities. And so we implemented over 125 blocks and 12 miles across the city. And, the outcome was resounding. We saw on average, 80% increase in uptake in people enjoying active transportation modes and leisure activities in the streets. And, over 90% or 95% of vehicles traveling on these shared streets at 20 miles below or 20 miles per hour or below. So, it was a quick implementation, but, very effective. Next slide. We also had to recognize the just fundamentally disastrous impact of the pandemic on our entertainment and dining industry. They're just so important to the city's economy and identity in so many ways. And so we launched our outdoor dining program. 450 establishments participated at over 260 locations. And for any of you who may have been out this summer participating or observing or enjoying this, we really tried everything. We had street closures, we had partial street closures, we had extended sidewalk dining, we had opportunities to use the curb lane, and really pushed ourselves to work with our partners to try different things and be as quick as possible to find solutions that work in the different contexts of Chicago. Next slide. In terms of traffic design, we launched 7 miles of rapid delivery pop-up bus lanes on Chicago Avenue and 79th Street. And then, this dovetails both with discussions and themes that have been in the city for a long time around the essential nature of public transit, but also, again, as we saw in that earlier graph, although there may be decreases in general traffic volume that may have happened, those decreases are not created equally. And essential workers in the logistics and healthcare industry and food service who disproportionately rely on public transit. And so again, we continuously see these themes cross-connecting. We also deliver rapid delivery pedestrian improvements throughout the central area, trying to reclaim those curb corners and those tighten those radii in ways that help account for, again, what we're seeing, lower traffic volumes and higher speeds, and then also, prime the pump for more permanent investment, with curb and concrete when we can get to it in future investment cycles. Next slide. Really exciting. We've expanded our Divvy bike share system to the far south side, covering 50 more square miles, launching thousands of new e-bikes, and also doing our second scooter pilot for shareable dockless e-scooters, covering the entire city of Chicago. And again, with a really strong commitment to equity, where as part of the pilot terms, we had 50% of the scooters dedicated to essentially 43% of the city land area, and ensuring that within these target areas that have been historically disadvantaged in terms of socioeconomic outcomes, that we have an even distribution of the supply of these modes. So that private sector is coming to Chicago, that's great. They want to invest and do something, but we have to make sure that that's done in a way that lifts all ships in the harbor. Next slide. And then identity, community, and stewardship. Sort of tying back to the earlier themes that what do our streets mean to people as a place for expression and for a place of gathering, as part of our rapid delivery projects, introducing art and color and ways to both establish place, but also give a chance for, people to express identity and build community, painting viaducts and creating placemaking. And then just showing that level of care through maintaining, thousands of street tree grates and replanting systematically, particularly on the Madison corridor, which was, devastated in the 60s during the MLK riots, and unfortunately, again, saw unrest over this summer, and, bringing investment there. Next slide. So there's more. As many of you may have heard, at the end of last year, the city of Chicago passed a very ambitious $3.7 billion with a B capital plan with a first year $1.5 billion year one and year two passed through council. And so this is a real game changer for the city and for infrastructure investment. This is an opportunity to really be equity focused, needs-based, and data-driven at the core. And with this money, we can really program systematic investments in areas based on all the things we've ever wanted to do and that we've been piloting as a department for years, but then having the capability and capacity to do this in a way that is scalable, much broader than we've seen in recent times. Next slide. So in specific, this means bridges and viaducts, street resurfacing, more street lighting, traffic signal modernization, sidewalks and ADA ramps, And then within the project development division, we'll be launching the design of a significant number of new streetscapes throughout the city to address the Invest Southwest Corridor program, and then a specific set aside for public art as part of that, planting literally thousands more trees, and then more than a $50 million investment in Vision Zero complete streets and transit over this initial period. So thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm really excited about the year ahead and the contributions that also many of you, I'm sure, will get to make, both as part of this capital bond through your services and just your general leadership in the industry to help us get to where we are. So thank you, and I think we have some time for a few questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Vig. Good to see you again, by the way. We have a few questions that have come in. For others, if you could please put your questions in the Q&A box, that would be great. We're going to start with a question from Tex, John Mick. He's asking about what you predict from the new presidential administration in terms of money and changes in transportation priorities and how that will impact major cities like Chicago.
Well, it depends on what side of the bed I woke up in terms of predictions. I mean, I really do, I hope, much more of a focus on city autonomy and decision making. You know, when we were thinking of how do you frame our priorities as the Department of Transportation to an incoming administration, I really think of it as, you know, cut red tape, right? There are kind of a lot of strings attached to federal money that really don't work in a way that allows us as cities to do what we know is best for our communities, be that design standards, be that speed limit setting, be that even the way the Buy America program works, and very detailed things like that that sort of just get in the way of doing what's right. More fundamentally, though, I also hope we'll see greater involvement in terms of city input, in terms of these big kind of industry decisions that we have to make around the regulation of autonomous vehicles. And I think to date, we have great leadership at you know, ITE and NACTO and other people in terms of talking about these issues, but necessarily haven't been at the table. In terms of reauthorization, I think, you know, that is to be determined. I certainly do hope to see more money. I hope to see more flexible money too, in terms of, you know, every time we have reauthorization, we sort of start with the bill we had. And one of the themes that's emerging, you know, as I mentioned earlier, if you look at the confluence of climate, social justice and racial equity, Vision Zero, and the pandemic, I think, you know, we fundamentally need to rethink at the federal level how we align the reauthorization with the need to respond to those core policy issues of our generation. And we just have, you know, a lot of fragmented programs and funding streams that quite honestly make it very difficult to execute the work because you're always trying to, you know, fit your project into the proper bin. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. And perhaps the flexibility point that you touched upon kind of helps to get around that a bit. Jeff Young asks, what is the biggest challenge that you see in delivering your ambitious 5-year capital program?
Sure, thanks, Jeff. I think in many ways the challenge is balancing, I would say, speed with community input, particularly for the projects in our division. You know, we want to be as fast and aggressive and deliver outcomes and results to the people of the city. But when I think of something like a streetscape, it's really all in the details that the project really happens. The ability to integrate materials and texture and art that are meaningful to communities, that create sense of place, that promote local economic development. And doing that, I think, and doing that in a way that is meaningful often requires many iterations and, you know, several alternatives and talking through trade-offs. And we get to the best decision possible, I think, at the end. And but it's sort of a balancing act then of how we do that in a meaningful way in a contained way, but at the same time, get shovels in the ground.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have time for one more question. This one from Brian Roberts. He wants to know if CDOT staffing additions are included in the $1.5 billion package, or is that funding just for infrastructure?
So it's sort of, we're figuring that out. We're a little bit of building the airplane and flying it at the same time. Certainly we will need ways to deliver the work, right? Money for construction is great, but we need to design, we need to review, we need coordination. And so it's going to be a lot of heavy lifting for our staff, but also, finding opportunities to, maybe fill some of those needs in the department in creative ways.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Vig, for spending your very valuable time with us this evening. I know everybody learned a lot, and we're certainly glad to see you in the position that you're in. I think you're going to do great things here in Chicago, and we appreciate that. And we're certainly at your disposal here as ITE and as professionals to help you realize that vision as well.
Thank you.
You bet. You bet. Well, we have a few more things.